I told you that already. I wasn't going to disagree with CMIP, so I don't think I would.
Good evening, everyone. We want to thank you for attending tonight's special session. I'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, May 22nd, 2014 at 5 o'clock p.m. in the 5th floor conference room for a meeting of the Committee of the Whole regarding discussion of the Capital Maintenance Improvement Plan. Roll call. Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right. We have one major item here, which is our CMIP, and we're going to walk through this. This is in anticipation of our budget. The CMIP dollars are the capital monies that we spend both on projects and on equipment. Today, we're going to get an overview on CMIP generally as it pertains to our budget. Most of you saw this time last year, though for many of you, it was your first budget, and so you get a pass on if you didn't remember everything that hit last year. So we're going to do a little review on the big picture of CMIP, and then we're going to focus on projects tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to our administrator to lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. And that's really the emphasis as we get into this tonight, is to really set our stage as we move into the budget process. This is really our first, I will say, formal budget meeting to get together and talk about items that I'll be working to put forth in my agenda or budget as I recommended in July. And getting the framework around where we're at with our major projects is always core to what we can do from year to year. So as the mayor said, tonight we're going to walk back through a little bit about where we've been in the CMIP process and where we're leading up to tonight, and then getting into the whole list of projects as we're looking forward to 2014 and 2015, and then the out years. But of course, it's the 2014 projects that we already have underway, 2015 projects that we will either cash fund or put into debt. And that's really the primary emphasis of what we'll be talking about tonight, is what's there in cash and what is there in debt as we look at these out years or these next coming years and what we're going to be able to pay for. Unfortunately, a lot of what we're looking at is driven by, the parameters that we've set out, which is somewhat limited from a dollars and cents perspective as to how much we can spend and to stay within the strategic goals that the commission has laid out for me. And that primary one is, let's build our fund balance and let's not increase the taxes. So that gave us fairly strict guidelines as to how much money we can put into these areas and still move forward. So at this time, I'm going to ask Debbie Johnscher, our Deputy CFO, to kind of start the process and step through our history on this process.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I think you all should have, I guess just to start out with, everyone should have received a packet that has the CMIP detail. That document was also, should have been electronically emailed. If it hasn't yet, it will be. And also an electronic version of the presentation will also be sent to you. As the Mayor said, we're going to start out with a brief overview of the process. A lot of this is the same as what we showed you last year when we went through the first CMIP meeting. So we'll just start with the Capital Maintenance Improvement Program. This is a 5-year capital projects improvement and equipment needs. Improvements for projects can be construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, or maintenance of a capital asset. Equipment needs can include replacement, upgrade, or purchase of any new equipment. The way we pay for these is either with cash that we also refer to as pay-as-you-go, or we do long-term financing. Most equipment is lease financed over a 3 to 10 year period depending on the life of the equipment, and our larger improvement projects are funded with general obligation bonds and are usually over a 15 to 20 year period. What's included in the CMIP? Under capital equipment, this includes all of our fleet vehicles, which would be police cars, fire trucks, sheriff's vehicles, dump trucks, It would also include any large equipment such as tractors and mowers, street sweepers, snow plows, and it would also include technology equipment, which could be the purchase of computers or software upgrades. On the project side, which is the focus of tonight's meeting, we'll cover the different items that are included in the capital projects. I'm also going to have a slide later in the presentation that shows the different funding sources for the capital items that are included. So the first item there is public buildings. This would be any improvements to any of our buildings, City Hall, the courthouse, fire and police stations, Memorial Hall. It could include interior and exterior renovations, roof repairs, window replacements, elevator repairs, anything to do with our public buildings. Infrastructure would include street resurfacing, curb and sidewalks, bridge repair, sanitary and storm sewer repairs, parking lots and/or structures. Parks and Recreation could have repairs to shelters, playgrounds, any of the recreation centers, as well as traffic control. The process for getting an item on the CMIP, CMIP requests are submitted to the Finance Department. If you recall, we held our first public hearing back in February of this year. Usually that is held in May, and at that time, departments were asked to submit their requests, as well as the community was allowed to submit requests also. We've gone through an administrative review, and now we're at the commission review, where you have a chance to review the items that have been put into the document. Once finalized, the CMIP equipment and projects are submitted with the operating budget for approval by the commission through the budget process. Now I'm just going to get into some budget slides. Were there any questions on the process before I go on?
Last year's.
Okay. This first graph shows the historical budgets for the CMIP budget. This goes back for the last 7 years. The blue line that's up there indicates the CMIP capital budget as it has been, and you can see that back in 2007, we were budgeting our CMIP at $23 million, and that includes both cash and equipment. The only fund that is not included here is the Sewer System Enterprise Fund.
Go ahead, Debbie. I just want to maybe insert, as you said, that the difference, this is the dramatic change from where we were back in 2007, that Debbie's pointing out here, versus where we are today. And as she noted, we had $23 million was our budget in cash, and we had $20 million in debt. So we were working along in our CMIP areas for projects and equipment to expend around $40 million a year. And that's coupled with the fact that we were at a lower budget. So it was at that time when 2007, as you can recall, that's when the recession hit, things started to come, and that's why we dropped from our cash expenditures of 23 that was out there and only ended up spending 14 because we really put the halts on a lot of things we could. We'd already issued debt, and we stayed with that debt flow for a couple of years, and then you can see where it starts to tail off coming into 11 to 12. But the cash got cut down. If you go to the actuals, which is the line 2 below, from budgeted 23, then we dropped it down to only budgeted 18, but we were only spending 14, then we got down to 8 and 9 million, trying to get ourselves back in line with where our declining revenues were coming in very quickly. So that's a direct correlation to probably what you saw back in your surveys, and part of the things you're seeing today is you go back 5-6 years ago, we were putting out $40 million a year towards CMIP, directly streets, neighborhoods, what was going on in those areas, also from our departments, the equipment we were buying, and our government infrastructure as far as our buildings and such like that, which we pretty much really cut down hard at that point, and has put but that's the predicament we're in today, working with now basically half that amount of money as we look at our CMIP going forward. Debbie, go ahead.
And just on that note, I will note that as we continue to delay some of the purchases in our capital, that does have an effect on our operating budget. As we don't replace equipment, the maintenance costs ongoing continue to rise on the operating side. I was just going to make one note up there. In 2010, you do see the budget and actual numbers dropping, but in 2010, the debt appears to go up. The reason for that, some of it is the fact that we shifted some of our cash projects to debt financing, but we also in 2010 were able to take advantage of some of the stimulus bonds that were out there, and we pre-funded a lot of our projects. Normally our process is to temp note our projects. Once they're completed, then we go to permanent financing. In that year, the stimulus bonds were available, and we were able to bond projects prior to them being completed to take advantage of some of the interest rebates that were offered with those bonds. So that's also a reason you see a spike in that year. This next one just shows our total UG budget, and it kind of breaks out how much is capital. You can see that 85% of our total budget is used for operating cost. 6% is used to fund cash projects and equipment, and 9% is used to fund our debt service payments. So within that graph, you can see that 15% of our total operating budget goes to capital-related expenditures. The next graph is going to pull out that 6% that we're looking at, that piece of the pie, and break it out among the funding sources. And this, we've color-coded the different funding sources to make it a little easier to see. All of the three shades of blue are the general fund accounts: city general fund, county, and consolidated parks. Just to show how the CMIP projects and equipment are paid for and what funding sources. The general fund is mainly property tax and sales tax. Then you move down to the orange, which are the special revenue funds. We've got the special parks fund, which is funded with the alcohol tax, the dedicated sales tax fund, which is funded with the 3/8 cent sales tax that was passed in 2010 that funds police and fire operations and public infrastructure, and the street and highway fund, which is funded with the gas tax. The red on the other side are all the enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are, the revenue comes from user fees that are charged for the services that they provide.
That's very helpful.
This next slide is a slide that we've used in past presentations just to show our bond and interest expenditures on the city general fund. This is only the city general fund. It doesn't include the county. And it breaks it out. That top spreadsheet breaks it out by the different types: GO payments, TIF payments, and then other funds are all of the enterprise funds and the special revenue funds. We broke them out by the different types of revenues that are received to pay for those expenditures. The graph down below only refers to the highlighted line, which is the GO debt. You can see at the top at top of the graph we have a $20 million expenditure line. Over the past several years, we've used that as a target to keep our bond payments at or below that range in order to hold the mill levy constant. So we tried to stay at that range. You can see in 2010 we went up a little bit, but then in 2011 we did get back down under the line. In 2011 and 13 we took advantage of some refunding opportunities that helped generate some savings in those years. In 2015, you'll see that bottom blue section indicates some of our older debt, which is prior to 2006. In 2015, that debt drops off sharply. I think it's by almost half. So that also enables us to stay, as we continue to put new debt on each year, that continues to keep us underneath that mark. That little line at the very top, the purple line, shows, that's our estimate for the next several years for our, what we estimate that we will probably bond based on the current projects that we have out there in temp notes now. And that, at that point, we do start creeping back up toward that $20 million line.
Again, this is one of those where it took the action of the commission a few years ago when you look ahead where you're at with debt, because you can respond and you can put things in debt today, and you're really not going to have to pay for them in this category for 3 or 4 years. And that's where we were back a couple of years ago on that previous slide when we dropped our amount of debt down and said, we got to get this down below around that $14 to $15 million mark instead of clipping off around 18 to 20, because the mill rates that are dedicated to paying the debt are only generating so much money, and they weren't growing annually because we were not increasing as a value in the county. So that meant we had to just keep this very static and somewhat get it down where we saw this drop coming in out years. So that's why the commission really, I think, took a lot of foresight at that time and said, let's get our debt down, let's be very restrictive in where we are. And we lowered the amount of money we were putting into our debt projects in addition to the cash. That's allowed for a little bit of that room that's actually that white up there in 15 and 16 as we project to come out. Had we not taken that action, I am confident that that projected line would be well above what that 20 million, and we'd be sitting here today going, okay, we're going to have to add a $500,000 or $1 million over into the city general fund debt side in order to cover this expenditure. So getting it down there where we were and then maintaining it, as you all have said, is where we have to be until we start to see the value of our mill grow, and then you can make a decision whether you would want to put more in this category or not.
So I guess the next part would be to go through the detail on the CMIP projects, if there's any questions before we do that.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions on these, on this presentation thus far in terms of getting the big picture in terms of what we're doing and where we're headed? No? All right, so let's start walking through the sheet.
Okay. I've put up there on the screen, I think you also received a copy of the key for the different markings that are in the spreadsheet. An underline indicates an increase or decrease. Box indicates a new item that has not been included in the CMIP in the past. Dotted line indicates something that has moved either from one year to another or possibly a different funding source. And then we've also got the little indications if there's both city and county funding, we've tried to connect those together, or if there's debt plus grant, we've tried to connect those items.
Mayor, before we have a moment, an administrator,
Can you please speak into the microphone for the people on television?
of course,
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like everyone out there in TV land to notice the excellent pink shirt Mr. Walker brought to the meeting tonight. He looks very cheery, and we're pleased with that.
and my,
She always looks good. We're talking about you
you
tonight.
know,
The pink pants, too.
you know, I'm gonna, it's an administrative question. And for me personally, and anybody agrees or disagrees, I love these presentations, but they do me more value when I have them a little farther in advance than at the time of the meeting. I'm trying to focus on it, and it's not particularly this one, it's just as a general rule, I would like to have the printout of the PowerPoint when we're going to discuss the topic. I got this today, sometime during today. I mean, I don't live on my computer, so there was no way for me to give it the kind of in-depth analysis I should have had. And I'm just saying that I think as a general rule, we get more profit out of the discussion if we have it maybe, if we have it a day in advance or so that we can, and if we don't look at it before we get here, that's a shame on us. But, and I don't think I'm alone in this feeling.
Well, one of the things that all of these slides are slides that, these were 2014 numbers. And they were all, except for the pie chart was recoded in terms of the colors were changed, was presented in our budget packet last year. And I think, and one of the things I've encouraged, and this CMIP piece was passed out to us earlier this year when we had our first CMIP thing, so everyone could look through this packet of detail in terms of the projects and equipment. We have had that. One of the things I've encouraged, and Commissioner, I agree with you, that maybe we could have sent out something to remind you that we're going to do CMIP. Please review this in your budget packet from last year. I implored everyone to hang on to our 3-inch binder from last year's budget, because learning that budget, this is the same budget as last year, with just the numbers have increased or decreased in different categories. But by and large, it's the same budget we work with from year to year. So my encouragement is to, we do have this information available to us. I accept that we might have been remiss in not asking you to review that from the budget.
I'm just asking for, again, maybe I should carry my budget binder around with me.
Well, certainly for the next 8 weeks. For the next 8 weeks, you should.
I don't have a copy of last year's at home, and if we're going to talk about a subject that is now, okay, I've said my piece.
Thanks.
Do what you want to do.
Mayor, was there any changes on this compared to what was given to us?
Yeah.
Well, no, let me finish my question. So there were a few things on here that's different than our old budget, right?
All of the categories are identical to last year's budget in terms of CMIP. Because this is a 5-year plan, almost all the line items are the same, which is why that top sheet indicates, whether it's underlined, boxed, or dotted dashed box, indicates the changes. Because if you look at the line items, the vast bulk of these pages are no different than were in the budget last year and are no different from what was given to us January or February when we had our first CMIP meeting. So the only thing that's different now is since our January, February meeting and our strategic plan in March, when we gave the directive to the administrator in terms of where we wanted to see the budget and the priorities, the difference is the staff has gone out to the departments, received the input from the departments in terms of what they wanted, and they're making recommendations now to us for our review. Same categories, same topics, largely the same numbers, with a nomenclature on the top sheet in terms of what has changed. So as you look at this budget, the only thing that's changed from last year, if it's underlined, it's boxed, or it has a dashed box.
But that is a change, and so that's
What do you
what
mean
we're
that's a
talking.
change?
Well, if it's underlined or boxed, there's a change.
That's the most critical, so yes.
Yeah, so that's,
And they've been working on this the last several months because after the direction of the strategic plan. So in
Well-
terms of, could you have had that portion earlier in the week? That's the question.
yes, sir, that is the question,
All right.
that's all.
The answer is yes.
Yes, but we finished it yesterday or this morning. But yeah, and our intent now is to walk through categorically where we're at and talk about some of those changes. If there's a line item in here that we're not going to touch every line going through it. Debbie's going to hit each one. And Bill, why don't you come on up to the chair? That way you're ready to prepare to talk if we want to get into some of these projects. And Mike, and Jim, you guys can all come up here. We'll start getting into your stuff. So we'll hit these, talk about changes to them, and if you want to get into the detail or what's going on with those, we have the individuals here that can discuss these. Just go ahead and move up to the table, guys.
They look happy to.
Debbie,
invite you.
go ahead.
Okay, the first section we're going to start with are the debt financed projects. On the first page there are your street projects. You've got maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction projects. I'll just highlight some of in the first section, maintenance. In 2014, there were no changes to what was originally budgeted. And we do have the original 2014 budget column there for you to compare to what was proposed as the amended. In 2015, you can see that there are some reductions to some of the annual street resurfacing programs. Also, there's a new project, Speedway Boulevard resurfacing in 2015. Let's see. Down in the reconstruction, we had the Hutton Road, Georgia to Leavenworth Road. Looks like the construction portion of that was moved to 2016. We had the Minnesota Avenue, which we moved up from 2017 and 18 up to the 2014 amended budget. We've also got a new project, Donahue Road. This was a previous project, but this is to cover the final payment to KDOT, which when the project was closed out, they anticipated that there was a project coming, but they didn't know how much it was going to be. So
Questions?
Yeah. Does, Commissioner Markley, does this coincide with the school being built at that same time?
Yeah, Oak Grove Elementary is being rebuilt on this, they're building a new building on the same site, and it is to open in fall of 2015. So I think the idea would be for those projects to sort of coordinate.
Thank you.
Is this the road that's on a steep hill with it's just gullies on either side?
Correct, yes.
So a fairly treacherous road for school buses and kids and families?
Correct, and the best thing about it is, we knew it was an old school and we weren't sure if they were going to replace the building or put it somewhere else. Now we know for sure they're building again on that site. There's probably going to be 2 or 3 generations of kids that'll go through that building, so it's a great investment for us to take care of that road.
Mr. Heatherman, is this a complete street that will include sidewalks on?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on this particular street, we're putting a trail-type section on the north side. It's graded so it could have a sidewalk in the future on the south side, but really the trails, it's a collector-type street, and then serving the school will make a very nice bike and hike piece.
Great. That's even better.
I'm barely refraining myself from doing a happy dance over here, I'd just like to say.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Before we get too far in this, I would appreciate if Ms. Jostler can just help me with this legend. I don't have any question about anything in particular, but just using these so I make sure I'm understanding from here on out what's going on as opposed to with regard to the spreadsheet key. So on page 1, under the 2014 amended gray column, we're seeing $2,200,000 there at maintenance project number 1, that line item. And then in 2015, we're seeing $1,900. Tell me what is going on here.
That
Ms.
just,
Yeah.
on the neighborhood street resurfacing, that just shows a reduction. The amount in 2015 was originally 2.2 million. It's dropped to 1.9 million. So that's why it's underlined, because there was a reduction. The underline could either be an increase to the amount or a decrease to the amount.
Okay. So going back to the handouts that you talked about earlier when we were looking at this $20 million for 2015, this amount would be in that debt financing amount that we're trying to keep the lid on?
Yes, and I could have started, I guess, probably if I draw your attention to page 3, would be a good place to look at as we begin the debt. If you look down here at the 2014 budget, you see the numbers on 2014 amended down there, 16.8 million, and then 2015, 12.6 million. Okay, our target here is around the 14.5. What Bill sat down and did in working through the debt projects, and Bob, was to say, okay, this really is a 14.5 number. When you blend the two together, what we're doing is getting some of the projects lined up to start in 2014 it gives us authority, so anything that gets added to the 2014 budget, we're not issuing debt this year, we've already issued our debt in March, but it gives them budgetary authority to begin the work on those projects this year, so we can start to bid them, let them out. Then we go ahead and debt it, combined with what we're doing in 2015. So that we're in our numbers here coming in. So that's where you're seeing those two numbers. Then you can look out here in 2016, I'm still high. I didn't push everything out that we probably need to push out because we're not going to be able to hit $20 million in 2016. We're going to have to work that over. But 2017 starts to get a little bit back in range to where we're at. Our focus is always on the 14, or the immediate year and the next year as to what we're really going to do, and then we're kind of setting a plan in those out years. But recognizing right now that 2016 is not going to be as high as that number is. So that looks ahead. So the answer to your question is yes. That keeps us within that area. So if we look at some of these projects that we go along and we say, hey, we want to move this one up, then I'm going to say, what do you think we would move out, and to make it happen? And that's the process that Bill and Bob Roddy and Mike Tobin and Don Jones and everybody kind of goes through as we start working with our different projects, see what we can do.
Commissioner Murguia?
I almost forgot my question, Mayor. Does anybody have a copy of the CMIP from last year? I grabbed the old CMIP as you suggested. However, I only had the access to the one the year prior. So I'd like last year's. If anybody has that, that would be very helpful for me.
I've got, just to look at here, I've got my budget book. So-
Yeah, if I could just have the insert, I don't want that.
Okay.
Cold book.
All right, do we have any other questions while we're doing that? Or do we want to keep moving? How about we keep moving, and then as that's available?
Joe, can you look that up while Debbie can complete this?
So I do have one more question while we're waiting on that.
Okay.
So Doug, can you remind me of this? It seems like I should know this answer, but I'm not sure. So every year that we do budget, we never take items that are in the CMIP budget off of our budget, off of the list. We may move them back, we may move them forward, but do we ever remove them altogether?
Well, and you're not, of course, once we're done, then they're removed. So if it's a project that was continually going forward,
Right.
it gets completed. Bill, I don't know, if we have a project that's out there that we've thought needed to make the list in future years,
No, I just mean.
typically we'll have left it out there. Now, we've moved some of these into, there's a category of unfunded. So we did do that a couple of years ago, if you recall, where we said, look, we're not just going to leave all these out here in the out year saying we're going to do all this stuff. And some of it came to, as we were looking ahead at some of our future fire stations, we had different things going there, but we wanted to get all our studies and everything done in future years. So we said, let's take those and a few others, and we put all this stuff in a unfunded category.
Okay.
And so the answer to that would be, yeah, they're off, but there's still things we have to address. So we either have to come up with different solutions for them or fund them.
So, tell me again, they're not listed out under the unfunded category?
You have that?
The unfunded category
Yeah,
is
we'll get to
included
that.
in this
So, yeah,
document.
there's,
Is the unfunded category, does it have a list of projects underneath it?
Yes.
This is, okay,
Yes.
perfect, because this is what I tell you, as now an older commissioner versus a new commissioner, what was very difficult for me in the beginning is to keep track of projects. When you bring a project forward, first of all, getting it on the CMIP list was very difficult, which is different now. But then once you get it on there, the nice thing to be able to do is go back to the old budgets, pull them out, and to monitor what has happened with that project over the last so many years. So I just want to make sure that when we put something on the CMIP list, that it never comes off unless it's done or unless it has taken specific commission action to remove it for whatever reason. Do you see what I'm saying?
Do you have examples of?
It's a bad example, but I'll give one. So, because it's all I can think of right now. So, for example, I haven't gone through all of the budget CMIP list yet, but I had requested that the TA Edison area be put on the CMIP list for a benefit district. And you know how that's kind of extra, so sometimes those get pushed out oftentimes. And then there are a number of benefit districts that were ahead of TA Edison.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? And so if TA Edison isn't on the CMIP list every year, then I don't know where it falls on the list of getting done. If it just keeps getting pushed back, then I wouldn't know that. It just seems to me that I remember from last year's budget, a couple of years in the middle, it didn't make it to the list. I just want to know it's always on the list until it gets done.
Bill, I don't know
I
what
know
your
it's
thoughts, I mean, probably the area where we
That
would
was a
address that would be to, because there's a lot of things, and I know additional requests come in that, yeah, I would rather put them on an unfunded than I would put some artificial feeling by somebody that, it's kind of like looking at next year, and I just haven't whittled that all the way down. I'll probably try to do that more before we present a budget in July, but to say, well, it's in 2016, it's going to get done. When you all know, I'm going to cut $5 million out of that budget before you get it. So we have to work on that. So I don't want to just load everything into 2019 and we go down the path and now we got $45 million worth of projects we're going to do. So, Bill, I know you have some thoughts on that as we look at these projects and how we go and how we may want to put them out there so they're tracked by commissioners, and maybe that unfunded area is the way to do it? Because some of them never have been all the way up yet.
Yes, Doug, I think there was in the past a tendency to use the CMIP 5-year as also just the master list. And what happened is you end up with a very artificial 5th year, or maybe an artificial 4th and 5th year.
Yeah.
One of the challenges just from a department is some of our programs like NSRP, we are actually planning 5 or 6 years. We may not have specific streets, but we're watching trends for 5 or 6 years and we're wanting to project where we think we'll be. And when you go through that list and you have some projects that are real numbers and others that are just, every year we go through the motion of delaying them another year and explaining to you why they're being delayed another year because they weren't realistic. That's a challenge in communication that I don't know that we have a complete answer to. We've done a couple things this budget cycle. We did a few things last budget cycle to kind of slowly grow out of that confusion. And certainly it's been my recommendation that perhaps the Public Works and Safety Standing Committee, maybe in an off cycle in the fall, we have a discussion about how do we want to nominate projects for consideration, and what's the step at which we say we're now committed enough to this project to show it 4 years out and not move it. Put it in there, show it, make that commitment, and do that while we're projecting what we need to hold back for maintenance and what we need to hold back for unexpected items or opportunities that come up. Right now, it feels to me like we try to do an awful lot with one spreadsheet, and it gets a little confusing. I don't believe that we have intentionally removed any commission authorized or intended, kind of particular commitment project. Certainly there are maintenance issues or other things that kind of pop up and we think, okay, about 3 years out we may need this. It changes a little, it morphs, maybe we take care of it another way. We do go through the process and try and keeping a clean list, and I do know that the TA Edison School is on the list and is still there. But I do think some other process beyond just this one spreadsheet during budget season might allow us to handle that tracking issue in a way that doesn't require you to kind of fumble through multiple years of budgets and try to see if you can still see the same thing.
Is there someone on staff that could show me, I'm probably just missing it, since it's a lot of paperwork, last year where the benefit district section is on last year's budget? Someone could point that out to me.
And I do want to comment, I think Bill's idea about using the standing committee to kind of look at some of these out-year projects has a lot of merit, because it is an opportunity to come back in, kind of, you're kind of corralled into a certain amount of money right now, and this is what you're going to work with, but then we start looking at 17 and 18, and let's say, okay, this is staff's coming in with their priorities about where they think we ought to be pushing these up or whatever, and we can explain, and you can work project by project a lot more, and I think his point that, yeah, it's a good spreadsheet, it's a good one that comes forward as we put it in the budget document, but you can't put every story on this piece of paper.
Well, and I'll give you another example. There was some discussion in 2007 when I first came up here, and there was money, which seems like a distant memory, that we would look at restoring the courthouse across the street. It's a 100-year-old building. It's easily the finest building in our inventory in the city. It's a historic building from an architectural point of view and from a functional point of view. There's still a jail on the 4th floor that would need to be removed in order to convert it to regular use. And as we started getting into it, in terms of the depth of need of that building, it was like a ticker counter on an odometer. It just kept going up. And I think at $7 million, we pushed it to unfunded. Similarly, the plazas on this building, the municipal office building, on the east and west have damage structurally, and there are areas of our building we can't use, which are high-ticket items, several $1 million worth of repair that need to be done. And as that number went up, those got pushed as well. I think we need to have a place for our aspirational projects of things we'd like to do. Our park system easily has $50 million in deferred maintenance in terms of infrastructure. Underground infrastructure, Wyandotte County Lake alone has a huge ticket item in terms of the electrical and water infrastructure underneath that lake and around that lake. The major parks, Pearson and Wyandotte County Park, these major parks need major infrastructure investments. But at this point, putting a ticket item of that size on our CMIP seems like a waste of time. So we might want to, I think using the unfunded list or even calling an aspirational list of things that we believe need to be done, that we can put out there and track, knowing that it's going to be a new day before we're going to be able to take some of those on, but at least have them on the radar screen so we can have those priorities in front of us. Any other questions as we continue moving?
I have one question. Our revised policy that asks for modifications to the budget in excess of $50,000 to be brought to the commission, how does that apply to these line items? Well, is this the forum in which we would make those sorts of judgments, or?
How we make the judgments? I mean, when we come with a revision, yeah, if we're looking at a certain amount of money that was allocated to a project, that's probably a little bit different in the way you look at it. Lou, you want to speak to this? I think you probably can speak to how you would review that policy point and bring that in.
I think that specific language in that policy applies to the current year budget. And so what we're looking at here is the amendment, or amending the 2014 budget as well as the 2015 budget. So, however, if we had a project, a capital project that was a new project, or and maybe I'll say it was a major repair item to one of our facilities, and that project cost $50,000 or more, and and it was not in this capital maintenance and improvement program, we would then take that project to the commission for approval, and we would go through that process. So it's a particular project that would occur during the current year budget.
Like when we made some changes to this building, we had some security modifications which were over where we were at on the budget. We brought that to the committee this past year. Committee approved the amendment, allowed us to move forward with it. Now you're seeing that in this year's budget as we get to it, that is built in as to how it works. But if it's next year's and we make amendments and modifications, your approval, that's what's set out and that's what we're going to work with.
Now, have we voted on the 2014 amended budget yet?
No.
No, so this 2014 original, that left-hand column, is what we voted on last summer and approved as the budget. The 2014 amended, we usually vote on at the same time we vote on the 2015 budget. So the items in 2014 amended are recommendations from the staff. They have not taken place yet.
I had a question for you.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Okay, so Mayor, that prompts me to ask, and you might have already answered this, that I'll take any one of these line items where there was a change, Doug, just help me remember this. So, for example, this Pearson Lake Dam study, spillway repair, you have down here that it was going to cost, the original 2014 budget, you projected $300,000. But then what we've amended is it clearly must have cost more than you expected because now it's at $450, right?
Yeah, I think once we got into it, that's where we looked at it and determined it was going to cost more. Mike, how's that?
Actually, we submitted plans to the state, and they reviewed them, didn't like our plans, and said, you have to make these changes, and that's what drove the costs up.
Okay, it's
So we
okay, I'm not
haven't,
upset
but we
about
haven't,
that.
I'm sorry, we haven't expended this. This
No.
is still upgoing. We had 300 approved. We got 300 bonded for this project. We need to spend 450. So that's the authority we're looking for. That way, when we get through the budget, we can go ahead and get it out there and expend it. We'll put a new note on for an additional 150,000 that'll help cover that additional amount to get to it.
And you will bring that to us at budget this year?
Well, it's to you right now.
Okay. So this is my question. And then when you go down, though, to Armourdale Community Center gym roof replacement, you said the original bid or the original cost you thought would be $262,500. Did you know that because you bid it out, or were you just really good budgeters, and did you know that that's exactly how much it was going to cost?
No, that
Because
was,
that's exactly what you're...
that was bid. That's the actual bid.
So
cost of the
before
project.
you brought it in front, you actually had the roof bid, and then you put that bid in the proposed budget for last year?
Yes, but it's a little different process than the one for the dam or for a major road project. The roof is one where, we didn't have to go to design on it. We're just replacing the roof. The work on the dam required engineering work and architectural work as a road or bridge project. So then,
Okay.
once design is finished, then you have an estimate from those professionals, but it's still an estimate.
Okay, so if this line item had been less, let's say it was $200,000, do we have to approve budget adjustments for less money?
Well, that's how we would build it in. Let's say we had gone forth and did that, and it was, let's say we had bid it out for the water line study, instead of going up 190,000, it was only gonna be 50,000 bucks, or $50,000.
Right.
That's what you would see there in that line item. So it would be there for an amended budget to be approved, showing a lower amount.
Okay,
And you would approve that. Of course, that's how those are good numbers when we see those, because it gives us a little room to work with other projects as we're building our budget through the year.
so we do get to see how it goes up and down. We do get to see if it's lower than what we projected.
If we've actually done it, moved forward with it, bid it out, and it's come in lower, and we finish the project. A lot of times, by this time of the year, we're not done with all those. We're still in the process. We may have a bid, and if it's close, we're not going to start dropping it out till we're sure we're through it, just in case there's something that comes up during the course of the project that might have got overlooked or something like that we have to do a change order on.
But are you asking, after we've approved the budget, let's say, so for the sake of argument, we'll take this first number, it's 450 on the top line of page 3. If we approve the 2014 amended budget in August 1st, and then October 1st, it's only 350. That's a change of 100,000, which by that new policy, so I guess I want to know, are you asking, do we then need to approve that savings at the time that that would happen after we approve the budget? Would that come to us?
Yeah.
It doesn't come to you at that time. When it comes to you is, what we do is we do a note to start with. So remember the note process, then the bond process. So we go into it, we issue, at this point, we said, for this year, looking at the park areas, we thought we needed $662,500 to do those projects. If in turn, it only cost us $625,000 to do, so we issued that much in notes. If we only spent $625,000, now we go to notes, we're gonna come back, and that's all we're gonna do. The rest of that gets rolled in to just pay off the temp notes, essentially creating savings, as we look at what annually happened, but you're down the road a couple of years, on that, so it meant, okay, back in that year, we're good. You come in a little bit lower, we issue the bonds, and the bonds you prove are for the exact amount.
Got it.
Usually in that bond resolution, or the sale resolution, it includes the projects with the final cost that we are bonding.
They have to, don't they?
That way you see them all.
And that's why I asked.
That's- yeah,
Because the bond financing is what I was really getting at.
Yeah, because the bond, whoever's buying those bonds has to know that the project's being done and for how much, which projects are being done and for how much, for the exact amount.
So you approve the money for the project, then you approve us to issue a note to go out and do the project. We do the project, get it done, then you approve final bonding with the amount of the project listed there to say, okay, that's what we spent on the end.
I just didn't want anyone to think, and I want to make sure I was thinking correctly, and that we can't move around excess money to another project without it going through a whole nother process of bonding if it's being bonded and not being paid for in cash. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we can't take a savings from one line item and move it to another with great easement.
Yeah, I think what we have the flexibility to do is if we go out and we issued all the notes for these projects that are approved in the 2014 area. And then we're coming back here today, like in this Pearson Dam, where we're asking another $150,000. So let's say as we've gone through the course of the action that we've issued in excess notes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe if we don't have the latitude, if we've issued enough notes, more than what we needed, and then you said, yes, you can spend another $150,000 on Pearson, well, I don't have the ability to get that until next March when we do our next note issue.
Right.
So, but if you said you can expend it by going through this budget process, and there's $150,000 already available in notes, I think we have a little bit of latitude to grab some of that money and spend it on projects.
What you'd have to do is, you would have to get a resolution, an authorizing resolution for the
Right.
project you want to spend the money on. You'd have to get that authorization done before you started the project. Just like when we go in the fall, we will come back for these projects that have increased authority. We will bring those back to you in the fall, increasing the authority on